Welcome to the Lawyer Life podcast, where the personal, professional, and political intersect. Each week, we discuss a topic to help ourselves and other lawyers navigate our days with a little less stress and ideally a lot more fulfillment. On today's episode, we have a featured conversation with music industry executive and proud Canadian lawyer Erika Savage. We'll ask Erika about innovation and blazing new trails. I'm Mike Anderson.
And I'm Darlene Tonelli.
Hello, Darlene.
Hello.
How are you today?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
I'm good, thank you.
Excited for today.
I'm very excited. I was thinking as we prepared for this podcast, I would never get to speak to the caliber, certainly, and level and people with the level of experience that I do, but for this podcast so regularly. So I'm very grateful, and today's an exciting day for that.
Very exciting. Why don't you go ahead and do the introduction, and then I can add some commentary after.
Okay, we're going to get right into it. Okay. Named one of the most powerful executives in the industry by Billboard Magazine's 2018 Women in Music issue, Erika Savage is a trailblazer in the music industry. She has helped build the careers of the biggest artists that populate our playlists, from Lady Gaga to Snoop Dogg, and she's co-founded the female-focused FemFat entertainment group that produces the Honey Jam show annually here in Toronto. She's a lawyer holding a JD from Osgoode Hall and a BA from the University of Toronto, and a proud Albertan that started her legal career here in Canada. And today we will learn about Erika's trailblazed path and benefit from the lessons that she's learned along the way. So with that, we'd like to say hey to Erika.
Hi, guys.
Hello. Welcome to the Lawyer Life podcast.
Thanks so much for having me.
It is so awesome to have you. When we started this podcast, just to give you a bit of background, we had as one of our objectives, obviously the overarching objective is to help lawyers navigate their day with a little less stress and more fulfillment. And we always said that our goal was to have guests on who are lawyers, but are doing extremely interesting things with their law degree and have a courageous path, right? I think one of the things we want to talk you through today is how did you have the confidence to know that you would leave law school and end up in this amazing space? So let's start there. You went to law school. When did you know that you were going to be a music lawyer?
It's actually interesting because I started at Osgoode having no idea that there was something called a music lawyer. I did not know that. So I had two very different parts of myself. I would say I had my academic, self who decided that I wanted to go to law school. And then I had my music industry self I'd basically been working kind of early on doing like rave promotion in Calgary when I was growing up. I'd been DJing a little bit and I'd always been dancing. So music and dance was like a really big part of sort of my artistic life. And I guess I would say, what really made me happy. And when I moved to Toronto to go to undergrad, I started getting more involved in, music, promoting concerts, and also in dance. And I became a hip hop dancer in the early 90s before I went to law school. So I was not a typical law student. Let's put it that way. My BA was in political science, but I had really discovered women's studies when I was at undergrad at U of T. And I went into law school thinking that I was going to do like feminist legal theory, maybe be a law professor, feminist legal theorist. I had no idea music law existed. So I was working with FemFat, doing things like DJ showcases, and I was actually I started a dance agency with an amazing woman named Jay Blaze, who's currently running an incredible, she has a Blaze dance agency. So I started doing hip hop choreography and working with dancers and representing dancers. So I was doing all that kind of stuff on the side while I decided to go to law school. And it was pretty funny. Like, there were definitely days when I think about it where I showed up at law school and I had no idea like what I was getting myself into in terms of like the regiment of it. It was so different from undergrad. And I was working, at different clubs as a dancer. Like, I did Fluid on Wednesday nights. And then I would go to my one entertainment law class that at the time, I don't know if it's different now. It was called Entertainment Law. And it was at 8:00 in the morning on Thursday.
Oh my God.
So this was what I was dealing with, kind of a strange double life. And then a crazy thing happened, which is I showed up one day because at lunch at Osgood, they had a entertainment law society, like lunch, bring your lunch and listen to speakers. And at the time, the entertainment law society was really not a welcoming place because it was mostly people who wanted to be hockey agents. Right. Which when I tell people in America this, they're like, what is that? Like, they think that's really funny. And I love hockey, grew up as a big Calgary Flames fan, but I did not need to hear people talk about hockey any more than I had already heard. So I showed up to this like entertainment law society thing, not really thinking it was going to be that interesting to me. And in walked Cindy Zaplachinsky, who is a dear friend, working right now in New York at Universal Music Group. She was working at Universal Music Canada. And she walked in and she had this cool, like, baseball-style leather jacket with the globe on the back. And when I realized that she worked at a record company, it kind of was one of those moments where I was like, wait a minute, you can do that? Like, it had never occurred to me you could be a music lawyer, that you could work at a record company. The idea that artists needed lawyers to represent them had never occurred to me. So all of that opened like a huge door for me of realizing that I could combine two things together that I loved, which was music and the law. And that's when I started thinking about how do I become a music lawyer. Very long answer to your question.
Well, it's good. That's what people need to hear, because I think it's so. We go into law school the first day, and one of the things we talk a lot about on the podcast is that sometimes the assumption is you have to park your old self at the door, park your interests at the door, and suddenly transform into this new, fully baked, risk-averse, suited lawyer person. And so what you're effectively saying is you have this aha moment where you realize that your whole self might be useful to you in your career.
Yeah, and I think that it was interesting because I think it was not easy. There were scary moments when I graduated from Osgood. I did not have a job because I wanted to get a music job. And a lot of my friends had gone to big firms. So it wasn't just this really graceful, elegant maneuver. I had to keep looking for music jobs. And I think that in the end, the reason I was able to get one was the fact that I had actual real world experience and had a proven track record of somebody who had worked with artists and, had worked on video sets and like put on live shows and done real, put in time, and like definitely have had so many interviews over the years with young people who say, who interview and you're the person interviewing, and the answer is always like, I love music. Mm-hmm. So it's, which people do. And I'm sure the person, many of the people trying to get into the music business do love music, but I do think it distinguished, I think my resume definitely did have, an element of being able to stand out because of that real world experience in the business.
Going back to what you mentioned about you didn't have, a job straight out because you didn't take the traditional path. Can you just walk us through, how you dealt with that, and then also how you had faith that, like, looking at a relatively intimidating industry like entertainment can be, how did you end up getting to the place where you were hopeful to get?
Yeah, I think a lot of different crazy things came together, but at the end of the day, you hear a lot about people needing to come into situations like, so for me, my first job really after the call to the bar was becoming manager of business affairs at Universal Music in Toronto, and I would not have had the ability to get that job if I hadn't done a couple of things. One of which was when I was in that entertainment law class that I was referencing, I wrote a paper, and I wrote a paper about the role of women in hip hop and R&B in Canada. And all my friends told me I was going to fail the class. 100% paper, right? Class, right? Like, 100% of your mark is on your paper. And people were like, you're nuts. Like, you have to write a paper about hockey. If you don't write a paper about hockey, you're going to fail this class. And I just was like, I can't. Guys, I just can't do it. I cannot write a paper about hockey. So I wrote this paper where I talked about, Mishi Me and like, FemFat and what Ebony Rowe, who is the founder of FemFat, had been doing, and, Julie Black, and like how important these women, basically like what the women in the music industry in Canada and urban music were bringing to the table, and the importance of like the role of women in urban music. So again, I kind of went back to my women's studies background, and people were like, you're going to get killed. Like, you're going to fail this class. And I handed it in, and it was just one of those crazy things where it ended up being because my professor was a hockey agent, he didn't mark my paper because he went, I don't know anything about this. I have no idea about it. So he gave my paper. Unbeknownst to me, there was like a guest professor marking my paper. That person ended up being Graham Henderson. And he gave me an A. He might have given me an A+. I'm not sure, but it was definitely an A or an A+. And I didn't even really know who Graham was at the time. I think I found out later because he became my boss, right? So he ended up hiring me for that job at the end of the day. And so he understood sort of who I was and where I came from. He also said, look, first job I had was like a contract position where he said, Erika, I don't know if I can get you to a full-time position. I don't have the headcount right now to do that, but I really want to bring you in. So are you willing to do a contract? And it's a funny project when you look back on why I was hired, because I got hired to look at every record contract in the cupboard, because we had file cabinets, right, in those days. Every single recording contract with every Canadian artist, to make a chart as to whether or not we had what was referred to as like digital rights. Like, did we have the right to sell their music digitally? And it seems hilarious now because I think my chart and it was like a 6-month contract, I think my chart got thrown in the garbage. Like, nobody ever looked at it. It didn't really matter because we all, as an industry around the world, decided that the words in any matter, in any media now or hereafter known, basically, which was in every recording contract, gave every record company the right to exploit music digitally from CD to digital. So my chart, which was awesome and very well executed, was like a piece of garbage, like thrown into a shredding machine. But what it did was it allowed me, can you imagine, to see every single recording contract and study every single recording contract. So it's like the most amazing first project. So I got to really study whether it was, Tragically Hip, Jan Arden, all these incredible artists. I was holding their recording contracts and I was reading them. And I was able to understand like how maybe Polygram had a different form than A&M had a different form from, the various labels. So I learned a lot and it was really invaluable.
And what's so interesting is that as we talk about finding your authentic path, so many people say to me, my background also is music, as people probably know. A lot of times people say, well, how did you execute that with, planning and strategy? But, what I often say is you do the right thing and the results come. And your story really validates that, actually, because there are always these people saying, oh, no, that'll never happen. Oh, no, you can't write a paper about women in hip hop. You need to write about hockey. The fact that you wrote that paper led to Graham, led to Universal. It's that, I'm not saying it's simple because it's not. It's just not knowable, like it's not predictable what can happen. It's not like you do this and you get that. But it's kind of more, the funny thing about our world is that the very idea of you writing a paper on hockey is so funny to me and would seem like such a waste, not because you don't have like solid Calgary hockey credentials, but just because it would seem false, And the fact, I think that it's so interesting that you brought that up, because at law school, there's all these voices kind of pushing people to do things that are inauthentic under the guise of that's what's going to get you the mark, that's what's going to get you the job. And as we sit here today, you've been practicing in the industry for a very long time. You've had the opportunity to do some truly extraordinary things, be there for the beginning of huge careers like Lady Gaga's. In my own world, you were there. You're the one who explained to me what a ringtone was. I remember back in the day. And it's inspiring to see women inside the industry getting to pretty much the very top. You've most recently been at Interscope Records, which is sort of, I think one of the top labels in the world, certainly one that has put out a ton of music that I love. And to just have that, like, I feel like having you on this podcast is so important just to show people what's possible. I mean, you're from Calgary, Alberta. You came to Toronto. You ended up in LA. You've lived there for a long time, and you're pretty much at the pinnacle. Your sister is also in the entertainment industry and more on the TV side. How can you tell us a little bit about, like, was her career in TV and something you can talk about? Was that inspiring to you? Did that sort of make it possible for you to believe that you could do these things too?
Yeah, yes. I think for sure. I'm 4 years younger than my sister, and I really haven't had a very original thought because I really followed her to Toronto. She had gone to grad school when I arrived, so she had just left. So we weren't at University of Toronto together, but it wasn't very original. It was like I actually went and lived in the same residence, which was Tattle Creek, at Innis College, because I had seen my sister go there, stay there, and then she went to grad school in Iowa while I was in University of Toronto. And I think, she really thought she was going to be a professor, a film theory professor, and she was pursuing her PhD. So she was very much like giving me that academic kind of model of like you can work hard, be smart, have really interesting ideas, and kind of pursue your dreams that way. And she's an incredible writer. But I think in terms of looking at what my sister did, she also kind of took a turn because she was doing her PhD studies in Iowa, a very prestigious program, and she went to LA to work on her dissertation. And while she was doing research in LA, she ended up interviewing to be a script reader, which, she didn't know what a script reader was. She read an ad in the back of a trade magazine while she was in LA that said script reader needed. And she's like, well, I'm a PhD student, so I know how to read and I could probably read scripts. So she showed up for this interview, and it was Drew Barrymore, interviewing her for a job as a script reader. And Drew Barrymore started her own company called Fowler Films. She was one of the earliest actor talent really to create their own production company, because it's very common now, but it was really, she was one of the first actors to try to say, hey, I want to control my career by really having my own company and developing my own projects. So my sister started working. She was one of the first 3 employees of Fowler Films. And that's how my sister's path. She ended up not finishing her dissertation. And I don't think she regrets that decision because she never left LA, and she's been incredibly successful film and TV, writing and producing and being a showrunner. So then I ended up in LA. So again, not very original. I just followed my sister again.
It's always interesting because even on this podcast, I've learned so much about your story that speaks to me and I didn't know. But in doing the research, I found an article about how you and your sister had like a skateboard ramp in Calgary, just outside Calgary, when you were younger. And I was very struck in that portrayal about how you guys have always been very authentic, so it sounds on this podcast like, oh, maybe one could chalk it up to luck, right? That Graham Henderson, who's now the head of the Recording Industry Association here in Canada, maybe it's luck that he got a hold of your paper. Maybe it's luck that she answers an ad and it's Drew Barrymore. But I do think there's something to be said for just continuously doing authentic things for the reasons that you believe in them. And they have these, like I said, unpredictable outcomes.
I think it's a lot of pushing yourself outside of your comfort zone.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that I think a lot of the good things, most of the good things that have come in my career, and I think my sister would say the same thing for her, is just that having that faith in yourself, that belief in yourself to push yourself outside of your comfort zone. And it's hard. It's easier sometimes to just try to say something's working. I'm fine doing this because it's going to be fine. It's going to be a result that works. But it's like always kind of wanting to push the envelope and see what could be next. And I think that that's something that, my sister and I are super close. And I think there is definitely an for me, like there was an opportunity to take a job in New York at one of the Universal Music Group labels in New York. And I interviewed for it when I was in Toronto. I went to New York and interviewed. And the senior, head of the department, the head lawyer of that business affairs department at the time was so sweet. He said to me, "Do you have any family in New York?" And I said, "No, my sister lives in LA." And he said, "You might want to think about going to LA because it's a tough city to crack." I don't think that I could have, I would have, had I chosen to go to New York, I think I probably would have been able to like survive New York and make it. But there is something to, the fact that like I did make a decision to say that like my sister and I are close, and I wanted to spend time in a city where she is, and it inspired me that she was able to like come here, and started realizing that like the center of what was happening in my work life in my company was happening in LA. So that was a huge draw, the idea that my sister's here and that's where the headquarters of our company is. It just made sense for me personally to try to make my way to LA, which I did.
So when you get to LA, and I'm sure that you continue to do, as you've said, like push yourself out of your comfort zone, and as you progress your career, I think that happens to us all, where a new issue or a negotiation or something lands on your desk that you haven't done before, and especially the kind of stakes that you were dealing with. What was, and I guess maybe what still is, what's your manner of dealing with those things that do cause you to push yourself a bit further than you've been before?
Well, I think you have to just jump in and really try to think about what you want next. So for me, moving here, I was kind of at a stage where I thought, I've kind of done everything that I can do here. I also discovered at that point that I was working more in an entrepreneurial capacity because the digital marketplace had really just started. At that time, my job became much less about drafting contracts in a traditional business affairs framework, and much more about going out and meeting with the telephone carriers, meeting with the different media companies and different media platforms, and figuring out how we were going to try to do those deals. And so it became clear to me that I really enjoyed that much more. So my skill set, where I wanted to push myself, was more interpersonal leadership, entrepreneurial. How do we execute together? So you learn what you love. And I think I started looking to like, what were the things that I wanted to try to do, and where did I see myself able to be? And I think that it's like, you talked about the skateboard ramp that I had in Calgary with my sister at our house where we were growing up. I think it's like from back in those days, it was like, okay, there's a ramp, and the city of Calgary has made a law that you can't have skateboard ramps in backyards in the city. So the ramp that we had was outside of the city limits. I started seeing that like skateboarders like myself, because obviously once a skateboard ramp was built in my backyard, I became a skateboarder at that point and started skating a lot and got really active in I was the president of the Calgary Skateboard Society in like whatever year that was, and that hadn't existed before. So it was sort of like pushing myself again, like what can I do to fix a problem, or how can I figure something out here to do. So the city of Calgary had to deal with like this 14-year-old girl who incorporated the Calgary Skateboard Society. I have my articles of incorporation document from when I was 14. So it's like, I love doing stuff like that. And then it became like, oh, there's a whole music subculture involved in skateboarding. We can put on, punk shows, and we can, do that. So it's like, if I take back to being 14 and I come back to my age that I am now, there's a lot of similarities. And I think your personality is kind of your personality. Mm-hmm. And you kind of figure out like what framework you're fitting that into, but it was always about kind of like, what can we do here? This is something's not working or something's broken. right? You see a problem. And I think that's something that a lot of lawyers have in common is problem solving, right? So like you see a problem, you want to fix it. And how can you do that in like creative ways?
I think the more lawyers come into the profession with a diverse background. I mean, Mike has a background in television production. I have not a creative background, but a record label background. And when we started this podcast, one of the reasons that we did it was that we thought that it would be important to the way we help our creative clients who are building software or music or whatever creative endeavor they're doing. We thought if we have put ourselves out there and tried doing something really creative from a lawyerly perspective, we'll be better able to help them. And I think largely that's been true. What do you think that's happening for you, Mike? I don't know.
Totally. Yeah. I think it's, to be put in the position of, I think of the one who is trying something new and, developing, in our case, new content, or, in your case, Erika, I suppose, strategy and where a, musician's career might go. It makes you, I think, build that muscle and flex that muscle instead of just being the advisor and the one who, identifies the risk and blah blah blah. It's a different skill set, and I'm happy that I'm trying to, and it makes me satisfied too. Like it's fulfilling for me. So in both those senses, I think it's helpful.
Yeah, it builds all of our credibility as a profession too, to not be just focusing on exercising that good old no muscle. And I've certainly worked on things with you, Erika, over the years, and I think you are unusually positive and not risk averse in the way that you kind of have to be when forging new ground. So I wasn't surprised to hear you say that living outside your comfort zone is a key. But do you have like an overarching philosophy? I guess, well, the last two questions we're going to ask are, one, do you have a quote that kind of guides your day, or like a mantra or something like that? And how do you keep yourself sane in this world of LA and high drama and all of that stuff?
Do I have a quote? I don't really think I have a quote. I think my mom has been a really strong kind of force pushing my sister and I in terms of like that. She used to say like, which is it's not that catchy, but she used to say like, own your own money, own your own power. And I think that financial independence for women has been like a really like leading motivation for my sister and I, of just like, we have been very focused on our education and then, our work lives, because we sort of saw our mom be a single mom and work really hard as a nurse and work shift. And like all of those things made a real impression on us of like, you work hard, but it's about like, you want to have a quality of life, but just making sure that like, we're just very focused on sort of like financial security as being like kind of a very important like women's issue. So I think that that's a strong thing that keeps us like motivated, and from looking and seeing like how hard our mom worked for us to be able to kind of like go out and achieve what we've been able to achieve. And then I think in terms of sanity, that's partially like my family, having a family life. And I speak a lot on panels about, work-life balance and, women executives, how to manage. And I think it's really important to think about like how it's actually, I think of it as, it's not easy by any means, it's extremely difficult, but it is definitely in my thinking sort of a best of both worlds. Like I have a lot of friends who, didn't, who decided when they had kids to stop working outside of the home. And then I have many friends who don't have kids who, are very focused on their careers. And I think that there's no right answer, no wrong answer. But for me, what keeps me sane is the idea that like, I love what I do. I am incredibly professionally fulfilled, but on a bad day, I still come home and have like a beautiful family with amazing, hilarious children who crack me up and make me smile and are ridiculous and silly. But then also I can have like a crazy day with my kids where like I'm up to my eyeballs and they're driving me bonkers. And then I can go and have a coffee at my desk and, be really excited about what it is that I'm doing at work. And I feel really proud when, my daughter will say, working with Gaga and having a daughter who's 7 years old is an incredible thing, because it feels really it's like the best form of fulfillment to say that she's looking at me. I took her with me to New York for the Women in Billboard Awards that happened in December. She came with me, and I mean, that was just like a life highlight, because she looked around that room and the screens had the pictures of the women who were being honored. So they would flip, from picture to picture. So every once in a while, my picture would flip up there and she would like get all excited and point. And then she said, "Mommy, how come it's all women?" And it was so funny. It was like, right. If this is the only place in the world you will ever go where it's only women being honored at a music industry function, so like that's great that you think that that's like the reality of life, that only women are ever being honored at these types of events. So I just thought that was great. And she got to see, that aspect of my life. So just being able to share that with her and have her be there, and have Ariana Grande be in the same room with me, that was pretty good for her. So it was really fun. And I think that's how I kind of keep saying, because you can have a day where, I always joke, I had this one day where like I closed a huge deal, and we were all celebrating, but I think I was like more excited that my daughter finally ate like both the white and the yolk of her egg for the first time. And I just laughed, because I was like, how kind of bizarre, right? Like the world is, but it's great. It's a great thing.
We do talk a lot about that on the podcast, about how it's useful when you have a demanding career to have a family that is just so, you unplug when you go home, because it's just so different. It is about the egg white and not the drama of management and artists and all that stuff.
Yeah, I agree totally.
Was she okay with the white or the yolk historically?
Well, she started getting in the only dipping into the yolk and not eating the white. And I do not allow that. I do not allow that. So we got into kind of a thing about it. And then that morning she like surprised me by eating the whole thing. And I was very happy, because I told her, because my mom is from a farm, right? Grandma Rita is like a farm woman. And I was like, the chicken works hard to lay an egg. You don't eat half an egg. Which, I mean, vegan children, they would just be horrified by this whole conversation. But don't. My daughter doesn't know about veganism, so we're not going there. Not yet.
I just want to say that this has been so great, and I hope that hearing you speak, and in all the future interviews that you give, if people follow what you're doing and just look back at the, really, I think, massive contributions that you've made, and that just the kind of example that you're setting of being yourself in an industry where that is not always the easiest thing to do, very inspiring to everyone. And I'm so thankful to you for your time on this podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. So fun. Enjoyed it.
Yeah, thanks so much, Erika. And so we are going to pause for 1 second, and we'll be back with our goods and gripes. The Lawyer Life podcast is brought to you by Inter Alia Law, experienced legal counsel when and where you need us. To learn more about Inter Alia, visit the website. That's spelled INTERALIA-law.com. Thank you. And we are back with our goods and gripes. Goods are things we want to promote and support. Gripes are things that annoy us. Can I start with a good?
Yes.
Okay. So Darlene, I think specifically you might like this one. So I listened to this other podcast called Sportsfeld, Toronto-based guys, and it's like as you think about it, it's like Seinfeld for sports. It's like the sports podcast about nothing. Basically, they just talk all over the place, and they're fun and good guys. And oddly, they have started this kind of online poll that they've done on their Instagram. It's a bracket of the top Big Shiny Tunes songs of all time. And they are slowly going through a voting elimination process to get to the ultimate number one Big Shiny Tunes song ever, that famous compilation set of albums that, Darlene, I think you worked on in your early days of a career that are like, part of the fabric of people in Canada's childhood, or like teenagehood or 20hood, whatever you say. So yeah, I think that's great and really fun. And it's something that I'm watching closely. There's hot debate. Fans of like Silverchair are coming in hot, upset that they lost in the first round. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. I'm going to have to, can I tune into that without following the sports part?
Yeah, it's on their Instagram. So just look up Sportsfeld on Instagram, and it's all on their stories. So you vote through their stories.
Oh, yeah. Fantastic. I'll definitely vote for, I think it was Big Shiny Tunes 9 and 10.
Yeah,
something
like
that I was on.
Those, yeah.
Yeah, I might be voting for 1 and 2 because those really were some outstanding albums. But okay, that's a good one.
Yeah.
Should I go with my gripe? And then we'll see, Erika, we're putting you on the spot a little bit. But my gripe is sparked by this podcast. My gripe is the people who say you shouldn't do that, or why are you doing that, or whatever the negative feedback from well-meaning individuals. I just kind of, that's a broad gripe. I think we should all accept the fact that what's good for one person is not good for the next person. And I'm going to try to teach my son that, and my daughter, because it's just something that happens all the time. We don't think about it. And then you hear a story like the one Erika told about how you get this feedback early in life. I just would like to get rid of that as a gripe.
Here.
Let's see. Do I have a good? Yes, here. Erika, do you want to go with good or gripe? Your choice.
Well, I would love to go with good because I went to sleep last night. My husband's away, so I was able to watch whatever I wanted on Netflix. So I watched the Amy Schumer Growing.
Yes.
And I thought it was great. And then I went on, I guess a gripe related is I went on Twitter, like as you do now after you watch something, and people seemed quite negative about it. And that's a gripe because I was like, wait, I don't know. I guess that's troll culture, right? But I thought she had become like, I thought the tone of it, like politically, was really like bang on and great, and I liked kind of like where she was going. I felt like sometimes in the past I haven't always felt like her humor was like exactly my cup of tea, but like I almost spit my tea, and you can appreciate that I drink tea every night, orange pico tea every night before I go to bed, like a good Canadian, which it's impossible to get tea. We have to bring Tetley. It's a whole thing. My mom comes with tea because you can't get tea here, like orange pico, proper caffeinated tea. So I almost spit out my tea while I was watching it by myself, enjoying not having to like talk to my husband about whether we watch, Ray Donovan or some violent show that he wants to watch. That was a good.
That is a good, and I've actually talked about that, and I was surprised with how funny I thought that special was. Really snorting, laughing, funny. But I gave the disclaimer to Mike when we talked about it. I just said, I would put an asterisk that probably not everyone would find it funny. So perhaps some Twitter trolls did not find it funny. But I agree with you that it was a reflection of the moment that was kind of needed.
Yeah.
Cool.
Awesome.
Okay, so I think that does it. Erika, thanks again so much for giving us your time and walking us through your career path. And I think so many people will be inspired by it. And all of a sudden, I'm sure for many you've been, the woman in the leather jacket with the earth on the back. So.
Thank you.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. Thank you so much.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
Okay. I guess then we will talk soon.
Talk soon.
That's it for this week's episode of LLP. Thanks to Inter Alia Law for presenting the podcast and to Nick Fowler for composing and performing our music. See our show notes for his website. Don't forget, we love feedback. Please comment in the review section or subscribe or like. We'd appreciate it greatly. That's it. Talk soon.